Welcome to Wildly Wealthy Life, the show that's all about exploring the different paths to a life of freedom and fulfillment and how that ripples through your personal life, family life, and to the community. Join husband and wife power couple Lee and Kat Hughes as they share people's stories from different backgrounds and lifestyles about what it means to live a life well lived. Tune in and take that first step to becoming the best version of yourself, personally and professionally, here on Wildly Wealthy Life.
I was very lopsided in my interests, always have been, very deep interests, and then just don't care about the other things. And I think that's perfect for money. Not everybody's like that, but for me with money, that meant that I was kind of automatically very intentional. For example, when I was growing up, I was mowing lawns and doing work around the house and shoveling driveways with snow and stuff like that, just basic stuff to get some cash when I was a kid. And I would save up forever and make these really big purchases of things that I really loved. Like I bought a kayak and I bought a road bike. I bought a really nice road bike. Cheap bike, but very, very good bike. I mean, I absolutely love those. So much freedom and so much kind of reusability. That bike I had for almost 20 years. Yeah, it's just pretty unbelievable. So those were the kind of things that I learned early on. I'm like, if I actually save up in some areas, I can spend really lavishly in others. And that's been my kind of philosophy the whole time.
Hello and welcome back to Wildly Wealthy Life. My name is Lee. I am your host for the day, and my lovely co-host and wife, Kat, is right to my left. Kat, who do we have on today?
Today we have Hari Mix. I am so freaking excited to talk to this guy today. He is a stable isotope geochemist. I mean, I don't even know what that means, but for layman's terms, he is an earth scientist. His research focuses on evolution of mountain ranges and climate. He is an avid alpine climber and has been on 15 international expeditions. His most recent big trip was to Pakistan, where he was able to climb the 12th and 13th highest mountain in the world without using any supplemental oxygen. Wow, what strength and just determination and resilience. It's just amazing. He was also a competitive distance runner for 9 years and a serious yo-yoer. Hari, hello. We are so glad to have you here today.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I think probably like you, we're in a really, really weird time right now. So I'm hunkered down at home and trying to adjust to the new rhythm of sheltering in place here in California.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, California too. We didn't actually really talk about whereabouts in California.
I'm in the Santa Cruz Mountains, so right next to the Bay Area, and that's where I work. I work down right next to San Jose,
Gotcha.
California.
The university there, correct? There's a Santa Clara
University.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, we're in LA, and can you tell us a little bit more about you? I mean, we kind of, touched on a few things, but tell us where you want to focus, telling our listeners about what you do.
Yeah. So I've always been obsessed with mountains, and I don't really know why. I grew up in Virginia, but that's been this kind of lifelong interest of mine. And I think it goes to the kind of sense of feeling small and feeling just impressed by natural processes and natural forces. And this really kind of hit home when I was on family camping trips out in Colorado and Wyoming with my parents. We would take road trips out there and go hiking and camping. And, so I think that my love of mountains and climbing mountains also is the exact same kind of, it comes from the exact same place as my interest in the earth sciences. And so I kind of started assembling the skills through my K through 12 education, and ended up getting into geology and chemistry when I was in high school. And I kind of ended up, dovetailing the two of those and basically becoming a geochemist now. So I was never 100% positive that it's what I wanted to do, but I kept pushing forward and I kept getting more interested. And so I kind of have now, almost at this point in my life, I'm 34 now, just kind of looked up and kind of taken stock of where I am, what's going on, how, I've just been going forward in this field for so long. So
that's really awesome.
Even though I'm pretty young, I've been studying, earth science kind of full time since 2004.
Wow. And how does the, just like with all growing up, like with having those interests, how does the kind of like your financial background develop, or how did it develop over the years, from like your early stages to where you are now?
Yeah. I was raised by pretty frugal parents. And so I learned early on that, a lot of the good things in life don't actually cost all that much. And I was very lopsided in my interests, always have been, very deep interests, and then just don't care about the other things. And I think that's perfect for money. Not everybody's like that, but for me with money, that meant that I was kind of automatically very intentional. And so, like, for example, when I was growing up, I made, I was mowing lawns and doing work around the house and shoveling driveways with snow and stuff like that, just basic stuff to get, some cash when I was a kid. And I would save up forever and make these really big purchases of things that I really loved. Like I bought a kayak and I bought a road bike. I bought a really nice road bike, cheap bike, but very, very good bike. And I absolutely love those. So much freedom and so much kind of reusability. That bike I had for almost 20 years. And it's just pretty unbelievable. So those were the kind of things that I learned early on. I'm like, if I actually save up in some areas, I can spend really lavishly in others. And that's been my kind of philosophy the whole time. Mm-hmm. And I never felt short on money. We were very, very kind of middle class. My dad was a high school teacher, and my mom made less than him. So we weren't rolling in it growing up or anything like that. But at the same time, I never felt deprived. And I think the same goes for the way I felt through college. And then in graduate school, I had a really nice stipend, but I was also in a really high cost of living area, being at Stanford. And so most of my money went to my rent, but I was able to, in graduate school, start maxing out that Roth IRA. Mm-hmm. So I started investing around 2008, which, was a scary time, but it was also a really, really good time to be young and to be starting out. So that was my start there. When I started getting towards the end of my PhD, this was in 2013. I would go on these, I've been going on these international expeditions, one per year, to the mountains of Asia and spend a month or two camping. And I would always have like a full on like reading kick. And in 2013, I made it my objective to learn a little bit more about money. And I just brought a whole bunch of books into the mountains. I thought, hey, I'm actually saving money now as a grad student. I'm going to get a job. Presumably it's going to pay more than grad school. And what am I going to do with it? And, how can I really kind of leverage it? And I thought it was initially going to be a boring but necessary task. Mm-hmm. And I turned out to get really, really interested in it and started passionately reading about personal finance a few hours a day, starting in 2013. And this was the start of that kind of personal finance movement. I don't know officially when the start was, mm-hmm. but, there was that initial wave of blogs and things like that just skyrocketed, and people got really interested and excited about the same thing all at the same time. So I was right at the end of grad school and right ready to start looking for jobs, and at my absolute peak interest in personal finance.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Now, did you, when you said that, you were raised by frugal parents, and then you always had this thing about saving. If you could save a little bit in certain things, you could buy the luxurious things that you really have value for, that you really love, like, the kayak and all that, which I love, by the way. You're so adventurous. It's so awesome.
Yeah. And, we lived near a little pond. It was the absolute cheapest kayak because I didn't have money, right? But like, I loved it. I dragged the kayak down to this pond and checked out the, beavers and stuff like that. It was great. Yeah.
I love that. Now with that, were your parents intentional on teaching you about money, or was it pretty much more on you that you kind of just grasped it? Like, I'm just wondering, what was your process of like being frugal yourself? Did you just kind of grab onto it from your parents, or were they intentional in teaching you about it?
There were some things they taught me, but not that many. And there were a lot of things that we didn't do. So and there were some things that, looking back, I think my parents could have done better, but the obvious things that they did were they lived it. Like you could just see it. Like I always got clothes from the Salvation Army and stuff like that growing up. I always saw them pay cash for things. They did tell me that to not ever use debt to make like consumer purchases or whatever. I know that they paid off the house early. Things like that. I knew that they were just basically the kind of old school, like our parents' generation, or maybe the generation before that knew that. My grandfather is another kind of financial mentor of mine or hero of mine, and he, grew up in the Depression and became a very successful investor. Partly because he was so frugal. He had such an unbelievably high savings rate. And this is something I learned, kind of coming out of taking care of him. I took care of all of his affairs. I was his, power of attorney and all that for a few years before he died in April. So I got to actually see like what his process was like through the 70s and the 80s and all that, because he took meticulous records. And it was all this just very, very basic, but very, very aggressive push towards saving and not being a kind of careless consumer. Same thing with him. He was very intentional with it and would spend lavishly in certain areas, but he was like ruthlessly frugal in others. So
on your point with the high savings rate, could you explain a little bit about what that is for the listening?
Like? So if you just think about the money that you bring in, what do you do with it? Let's just break it down into two places it could possibly go: spend it, save it. And so the savings rate, people argue about how you can calculate it. Like, do you put in retirement contributions, whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what fraction of your income are you saving versus spending? So savings divided by income is the way I like to think about it.
Yeah.
And in the case of my grandfather, it was like 90%, or, certainly 80% at times. Yeah.
That was
unbelievable. Yeah. I don't think my parents were at that level, and I certainly myself have never been at that level. But I think the principle goes that pay yourself first, basically. And growing up, I didn't do that. Growing up, I just went for the big purchase that would give me a big payoff. I never thought about long-term savings or investing until I was in 2008.
But maybe that was a little bit of a gift to yourself in the delayed gratification, because what was the time frame of, like, how long did you have to save to get your canoe, and how long? Like 2
years, for being a kid and like learning delayed gratification. And that goes to my other activities as well, like things like distance running. That's a long-term progression. You don't see results quickly, but you see results pay off if you really put in the work. There were years there where I was running 70, 80 miles a week, week in, week out. And, you're just putting in the work. And the same thing goes for the high altitude climbing stuff. Like you go on you train, but then you also go on, let's say, a 2-month trip, and you need to stay calm and stay focused and take care of yourself throughout that time. So I think like both of those work that frugality muscle, in the sense that they work on the delayed gratification piece, which is something I've always just kind of worked on. And money is just one dimension of how I've worked on that basic principle of, if I put in a little bit more work right now, or hold back a little bit right now, I can go bigger later.
You mentioned how, you started really reading and digging into finance. And at first you were thinking how this is probably, not boring, boring or whatnot, but then it started becoming fun for you and you actually were interested in it. What was it that made it fun for you, like learning about finances?
I didn't realize just the intricacy of like thinking about, the types of questions that I thought would be interesting were things like, should I put money into a Roth IRA or traditional IRA? Should I, like how to do tax loss harvesting, or how to interact with the tax code in an advantageous way? I think it's especially interesting, not at the super wealthy level, but at the like level of like your typical American. They can get so much more benefit from having just a little bit more understanding of how to take advantage of these things, how to prioritize, say, investing in a 401k at work or versus, their own IRA, or how to think about expense ratios. So I would get into it in terms of making my own spreadsheets and running out a decision in 30 years and saying, oh, okay, like actually that actually does matter if I make 7% versus 6% due to the expense ratio on a mutual fund. Something like that. I found really intellectually stimulating to apply some of those ideas in my own life, because beforehand I had absolutely no idea. So when I started in putting money into my Roth IRA in 2008, I did start at Vanguard. That was my mom's subtle recommendation. She's like, oh, you should, she gave me like money magazines, like, oh, hey, look, Vanguard has a lot of like good looking funds. And I randomly picked one. I had no idea what an expense ratio was. I had no idea if the fund was appropriate for me at my stage in my life or not. So when I started reading in 2013 about it, that's when I started to actually put two and two together. What's an index fund? Why would I want to invest in an index fund versus an actively managed fund? I didn't know any of those distinctions. I do have, like a strong opinion here. I'm strongly biased towards index funds for the vast majority of people. Let the professionals do what they do, which is active management. These are the people who are picking what they think is going to beat the market. They're trying to pick the right stock or whatever the investment choice is. Index means that you are, and usually when you say index, you mean a broad-based index, like a total market type fund.
Right.
So you're, one that people commonly cite is the S&P 500, the top 500 companies in the US, but I actually use total market funds, which include, thousands of different stocks in them. So what you're doing is you're buying the entire market. And you might think, oh, well, why would I want to be average? Why would I want to get the average of the return of the entire market? But the answer is that they're much cheaper to run, and therefore the expenses are much lower, and therefore a lot more of the returns get passed on to you. And so what turns out to be the case in the long run is the vast majority of people would come out ahead if they invest in the index, or very low cost option, and not try to outsmart some of these really, really big and really successful financial companies. And also to not let them take a large amount of your return. So if an index fund costs 1% per year less than an actively managed fund, that 1% compounds over the lifetime of your investment. And over, say, 30 years later, when you're retiring, if you start when you're 30 and you retire when you're 60, something like that, it could be 2/3 of your money that's gone to fees. It's extraordinary. I think it's robbery, frankly. For most people, it's a terrible product to buy into active management. That's my strong which I didn't know until 2013 when I started actually running some of these numbers and thinking to myself, I can't believe that and I unknowingly was investing in active managed funds.
I think it's that thing where a lot of us, if we don't really look into it and we don't really run the numbers, we're thinking, oh, 1%, that's nothing. 1% is nothing. But we really don't dig into the numbers and realize that in 30 years time, 2/3 of our investment is gone, which is a huge amount.
And it's like the exact opposite of all these other areas of spending. So normally you'd think, oh, if I pay more for a product, I'm actually getting a better product. Right? That's the exact opposite, right? You get what you don't pay for in investing.
Right.
So interesting.
Crazy,
by definition.
Yeah, like the exponential curves are just insane when it comes to the compounding, but like for you and against you, as you get out, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, as you're talking about. And it's just like, you could be on this trajectory where it's like, whoop, or, kind of like a more of a flatter curve, as they say. It's insane. Yeah.
And the exact same, thing about debt, right? Debt just is exponential, just in the exact opposite direction. So, credit card debt is making you exponentially poorer.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit of your financial picture now, like where you're at and what kind of investments do you do personally, or are there passive income streams that you're tapping into and all that?
Yeah, I consider myself financially independent now. but I do live in a very high cost of living area. So I don't, even though like the actual numbers are really large, it doesn't necessarily feel as cush as if I were to move to a lower cost of living area. Just with the necessity of the basic expenses to live here in the Bay Area, it's really nuts. But yeah, so I still work, and so does my fiance. We're both professors at Santa Clara University, and that is great. But professor salaries relative to the cost of living aren't that big. So my investments are actually now playing a major role in our lifestyle. And so in that sense, it's almost like financially, like had to completely switch and think of things as a retiree almost, because I am using that as an income stream. Almost all of my investments are at Vanguard, and I'm just all index funds there. I invest in basically two things. I invest in U.S. equities and international equities, in just the most broad index funds possible. I also have an investment, and this is an area of investing that I'm really interested in and potentially going to go way bigger in solar. I have a commercial solar loan, basically. It's a portfolio of different loans. And it's this company that basically has it's like almost like a matchmaking service of, in the small scale commercial. So I'm talking about community centers, small schools, small businesses, nonprofits, just places that want to put a solar system on their roof that's roughly 5 or 10 times bigger than your typical residential setup.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's say they're seeking a $300,000 system, but you're a small business. You're never going to put $300,000 down and then get a payback of 5 to 7 years. You'd be insane to do that. So what my loans allow them to do is they get this 30% federal tax credit for putting up the system. So that's like their down payment. They buy the system, and they get to save money on their electric bill on day one. And then meanwhile, I get a return on the investment when they pay the system off each month.
Wow.
And so they're saving money, right from the beginning. They get the solar, they own the solar in the long run. And everybody kind of wins. And what I like about that is that it's a steady income source. So what I did is I sized the loan that I made to the exact size of my mortgage plus property insurance, property tax plus homeowners insurance. So I have a direct deposit come right in, and I know that housing is covered, steady. And again, the only risk of this is like if the place becomes permanently not used to where no one has an electric bill there. But even if they sell the building or whatever, the system is they're still buying the electric.
Right.
So I think it's pretty low risk, and it's a steady monthly check, and it balances out the kind of all equity type portfolio.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, it's almost like a house hacking without any gas in your house.
Yeah. Or it's like bonds, but it's solar. You're putting solar on schools. It pays a much higher return than buying bonds.
Is this something that pretty much everyone can get into, and they can just look into it?
Yes, technically, but the specific company that I did it with, what they do is they go out and find all these people who want to get in on this. Then they build a fund, and then they fill that fund up, and then it's closed. So right now, today, they don't have an offering, but they're working on the next package, one of these, to sell off to investors. So just going to have to keep your eyes out. But it's not one company anymore. There are ways to invest in solar that are kind of up and coming. And what I like about it, again, is that it's as opposed to owning a mutual fund or a set of mutual funds, it's actually probably a more steady income stream.
Yeah. Is there a site or anything that you would refer our listeners to kind of look into this, if any of them want to look into this creative way of investing?
Yeah. What the company that I'm using is called Wonder Capital, Wonder with a U. But there are other it's an emerging field. Solar is now becoming kind of profitable, and I am working on maybe going even much bigger with solar.
And I think too, there's, just for the listeners, there are very similar things out there when it comes to real estate and different types of investments that also can be folded into like retirement plans and whatnot. Yeah. So definitely, do your research and things that you're passionate about or interested in. But that I haven't heard of that with solar, so that's really awesome. That's interesting to.
Yeah. People are doing that with real estate, right? Like there are these sites that you can buy. Yeah, it's kind of like that. I just don't have a passion for real estate, and I don't have a passion for putting in the work to figure it out. And if I were to even be to be a landlord in the Bay Area right now, it's a little nuts. Like it just doesn't. None of these investments in California actually cash flow in the right way, as far as I can tell.
Yep. It's a little bit crazy.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, I think that what I would like for our listeners to really gather from this is that what you said, like how, you're not passionate about real estate. You don't really want to learn about it. But you being an earth scientist, I think that the solar investment definitely matches like your passions more and just your interests. And I think that what our listeners really need to understand is that there's so many different ways to invest and to grow your wealth and grow your money. And it's all about what are you going to really love learning? What is it that's going to be something that when you read about it, you really get excited and you want to get into it and you want to know more and then you want to apply it. And so I love that this is so creative because honestly, I haven't heard of that either. Like it's just so cool. I just love it.
Yeah. So I did, I put solar on my own roof, like residential scale, which is like everybody does that, but it's the most expensive way to do it because the economy of scale piece, like it doesn't, the numbers don't work as well because it's more complicated. It's at a smaller scale. The commercial one that I just did is a lot probably better in terms of making the financial numbers work. And what I'm thinking about now, and then, coronavirus happened. So this is going to be, it's going to be a multi-year project regardless, but things are a lot more uncertain right now. But I was pretty full steam in terms of planning on going even bigger with solar to the large scale commercial or almost utility scale, like solar farm type size, where you're like buying land and just putting as much on it as cheap as possible. And as a climate scientist, I want to, in terms of making an environmental impact, a positive environmental impact, like if the cheaper that it is, the more that the economics work, that means the bigger that I can go in terms of putting more solar up. And so I'm looking for like basically a high rate of return because that means that I can put more clean electrons onto the grid. And, also this really works for me right now in this time in my life because we are relying on my investments, for a lot of our lifestyle. And so if I can even those out more so than the stock market, if I can smooth those out and I'm selling electricity in the United States, it's probably a more even stream of income. And so I'm looking at maybe converting some of my kind of mutual fund holdings over to a bigger scale solar investment. But this is the type of thing where I it's not easy. You can't just go figure out how to do this, one click. And I really can't afford to mess it up. So this is going to be like bigger than buying a house in terms of like needing to have my bases covered and know exactly what I'm doing. I'm not going to just go with like the first thing that pops up. I'm going to need to really, really figure out because it's just way too much risk to do this kind of in a haphazard way.
Can we go back just a little bit to when you were talking about your grandfather and how you were his power of attorney and I want to explore that a little bit on just kind of, I know just a little bit also with your background with your mom and setting up, estates and wills and just basically setting up family planning for yourself and for your family. What does that look like and what was your experience with that?
Yeah, so I think where we left off in terms of my financial journey was kind of in graduate school, getting ready to have this job, getting really, really excited about saving, about investing, about financial independence. And what that really looked like for me was thinking about maybe ultimately being able to build some more flexibility into my career after a few years. So I kind of ran the numbers in terms of, if I save at this rate, what can I do in terms of getting more freedom in my life? And I thought, right around the time of getting tenure as a professor, which is 6-7 years in, is when I thought, hey, what if I can be set up to have more freedom in my life by that point? So I kind of had that goal. 2 years into my job, I'm a professor at Santa Clara University. I had been saving like crazy, maxing out all my retirement accounts available, just being really successful in terms of my financial start. It was like a really unbelievably good, smooth start to my career. I was debt free. I'd been maxing retirement accounts. I was just in a really solid spot, had a lot of momentum going forward. And then I found out my mom was dying of cancer. And so I moved home to Virginia and took care of her for the last 6 months of her life. And then kind of cleaned up things in Virginia, wrapping up all of her affairs, selling the house I grew up in, all that kind of stuff. Wow. And because of all of that, my mom and her sister were my grandfather's only 2 children. And I took over for my mom in terms of being the point person for my grandfather. So I got to see all my mom's, estate planning and documents and all that, and become her power of attorney. I get to see her modify hers. I got to see my grandfather's. I got to see him, modify his, or work with both my mom and both my grandfather and their lawyers in terms of updating their documents and all this through these life changes. And then it became my grandfather's power of attorney for 3 years. So, all of his, every kind of transaction in his life, all his healthcare, all his taxes, all his bills were things that I did. And he died in April. I've dealt with the vast majority of his estate, and I just need to file these last taxes and wait for the dust to settle, any last bills to come in, and then I'll be done with all of that. So I've gotten to see, and then I've gotten through all this to see, how to make my own documents and what that's like. So I've seen 3 sets of them, and because of inheriting money from my mom and my grandfather, I kind of reached financial independence. It also kind of coincided with me having a lot of issues in my life. So financial independence is not some like a panacea for you don't have any other issues in your life. Right. I had a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and some kind of increasingly difficult mental health symptoms before I was diagnosed with bipolar. And I was hospitalized for that. So this has all kind of come out of that, is all this mental health stuff, and adjusting to this new life that I have. So happy to talk about anything. But taking care of my mom, taking care of my grandfather, all the estate planning associated with the 2 of them, and then all setting up my new life and my new set of documents and my new plan. Because I basically skipped from being early career, strong savings rate, really strong kind of investing trajectory and all that, to this jump of this total new paradigm that I'm in now and still adjusting to.
Yeah.
What, to begin with, I guess, with finding out that your mom had cancer, how did the conversation come up about the estate planning, and how did you bridge some of those? Did your mom and your grandfather start those conversations with you? Hey, we need you to take over this? Or did you go to them saying, hey, I want to make sure that things are taken care of when you leave?
Well, so it was different. So for my mom, I came home and my mom had she wasn't disorganized at all, but she had accounts everywhere. I think she was nervous about the system, and so that added a tremendous amount of work. And the first month or 2 that I was back home, and my mom was going downhill, we were in banks all the time. We were always doing paperwork. That's the other thing they were both very, very old school. They're both all paper. And so I was trying to basically masquerade as my mom and convert things over to online and auto pay and all this while she was dying. And, you know, I was, at some points I was taking care of my mom 21 hours a day, you know, just doing everything myself and all that stuff. But my mom was receptive to it. She, you know, we slowly went through and methodically went through everything. And, but it took me a long time to get up to speed on my mom's stuff. And she was very, very stubborn about certain things and took a lot of convincing that some things would just simply make more sense, make things easier. It's tough. I think, you know, you're dying and you're losing your independence, and, you know, both of them valued their independence a ton. And so there were things that you want to kind of grasp onto. But we needed to change the my mom's estate planning stuff in terms of making me power of attorney and all that. She had a really peculiar setup before. And the other thing is she had some things that were titled in the trust and some things that weren't. So we had to retitle some things.
Right.
Yeah. So, but all three of us, my mom, my grandfather, and I all have trusts. And that ultimately made it a lot easier for me. They're a little bit more expensive to get than just a will. But if you do get just a will, you should get the ancillary documents that go along with it, such as power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, advanced healthcare directive, like what do you want done with your body? What choices do you want? You know, people feel like it's, you know, taking away your, like, it feels like when you're saying these things that you're taking away all these choices and taking away all this freedom that you have, but it's actually the exact opposite. Like, if you don't have your stuff organized in advance and you don't tell people in writing what you want to happen, then you have no kind of say in the matter. So,
and it's a lot more stressful at that time too, to try to figure things out, because, you know, when you're sick and already, you know, facing other concerns, it's really hard to have a level head about everything. So being able to speak about this, you know, in advance and really decide these things in advance is so much easier than not, and then just getting there without all of these things prepped. So can you just a little bit, just you said about how there's a difference between a trust and a will. Can you just, for our listeners, tell us a little bit about just a few differences between what a trust is versus what a will is?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm definitely not a lawyer. You should totally talk to one. And a really good set of lawyers are the American Academy of Estate Planning Attorneys, AAEPA.org. Like, I'm not the right person to give legal advice, but a will basically just says like what you want done with your property after you die. And that's good enough for a lot of people, but, you know, the will, if the estate is large enough, we'll have to go through probate, which is a court process. And it's a very long and very expensive process. And it's also probably not what you want your family members doing.
Go through.
It's really, it sounds pretty brutal, you know, if you've lost a close one and now you have to go through the courts for over a year. And it is expensive. A trust is a legal entity that you create. So you create this new thing, and you can then retitle your stuff and put it into there. So for example, in my case, you know, my trust holds my, your retirement accounts don't go in it. They're always separate, but like my house, my checking account, my mutual fund account, these are all in the name of my trust. And then I'm the sole trustee. So that means that I get to make all these decisions, but I'll have everything in the trust listed out in terms of who gets to make decisions if I'm incapacitated or if I die. And I put all the beneficiary designations in there. So that's really nice that, you know, you don't need to worry about, you know, oh, there's this account, are those beneficiary designations up to date, or whatever it is, you basically just put everything into this one bucket, and then you can through the trust have everything administered. So you basically create a nice little ecosystem where everything kind of interacts with itself in the right way. And this is why you want to have like an actual attorney do this, because they want to, then all your documents are kind of talking to each other, referencing each other in the right way.
Right. Can you say that company again that you talked about?
It's the American Academy of Estate Planning Attorneys.
Perfect. Awesome.
And there might be other good ones, but I know that my mom's attorney and my current attorney are members of that, and I've been really impressed with their professionalism and all that. So I don't know how comprehensive that organization is, but I've been really
something to look into for our listeners if they want to check it out. I mean, obviously there are so many resources out there for these things, and so many choices, so many people to go to. The most important things that you do your due diligence in researching these attorneys and the companies that they work with and all that.
If you have a really small estate, like if you don't have that many assets, or if you have a really simple life, you probably don't need the complexity of a trust. You probably just need a will, and you probably need some of the other basic documents. And you can get around a lot of this stuff with just good, solid beneficiary designations. So for example, your checking account, you can go add a transfer on death, or what's the other one? Payable on death, transfer on death, payable on death. Either one of those, you just put the person's name in, in terms of, who this account goes to if you die. Regardless of trust or will, you should always check your beneficiary designations on all of your retirement accounts. The beneficiary designations supersede all of the will and trust stuff. So let's say that your will says everything goes to one person, but your beneficiary designation says the other. It goes to the beneficiary designation. So you hear these stories of people who like die and then everything goes to the ex-spouse because they didn't update it.
They never updated it. Wow. Okay.
So some basic stuff there to think about.
Yeah, definitely. And even just the simple thing with the checking account, you can actually, designate who the checking account goes to. And that's very basic and doesn't really need, a huge lengthy, meeting with an attorney.
Right.
So just basically for someone who, are looking into this right now. With your kind of just like your journey, what has been your evolution of your definition of wealth, like from where you started and then where you are now? Like, what does wealth means to you?
Trying to think about the evolution piece. For now, I think it means freedom. I'm trying to define what my kind of rest of my life is going to look like. I feel like I'm 34. I almost feel like I'm going through a little bit of a premature midlife crisis because I've been going so fast, so straight for so long that I'm trying to actually take stock of where I am and figure out, kind of what the next, kind of chapter is, what the bulk of my kind of working career might look like. I know for sure that I'll need to do something. I can't be happy just retiring and doing nothing and living off my investments or something like that. So I needed to create something of value for other people. And I'm trying to figure out what that is, while also giving me the freedom to do the things that I love, particularly climbing mountains that are big, takes a really large amount of time and resources. And so I've been doing, and I'm going to continue to double down on trying to take one big trip a year. This might be the first year that that's not possible, depending on what happens with this outbreak. But basically I've been doing that every year since 2010, taking one big trip a year. And sometimes I might actually be in the mood to do 2 big trips a year. So I'm trying to figure out, do I dovetail that with my research more and really, really integrate my life even more that it's been integrated and become this unique mountain and earth science person because I'm already really far along on that? Or do I maybe separate and say, hey, look, mountains are my hobby. They're a really big hobby. And then do something smaller, but of value over here.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really hard. And it's also really, really hard sometimes to motivate when you know in the back of your head that everything in your life is now optional.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably didn't realize that earlier when I didn't have the amount of money that I do now.
Mm-hmm.
You probably always have that freedom. It's just this illusion that you're trapped, that more so than the reality. But now it's like pretty undeniable that I don't need to do anything specific. So that it's really, really weird. Like, I've been trying to soak up the wisdom from people around me and talk to friends and family and all that, and think, like, what would you do? Everybody in elementary school, they ask you, like, what would you do if you could do anything? But like, literally, what would you do? Because I'm trying to figure it out. So I'm like, I think I define it as freedom, but I don't think that I have the answer right now.
Yeah, and that's okay. And because it is really just a journey of, every day there's so many changes that could happen, just like things that are happening right now, like we don't know. And I love how you pointed out that you actually don't really need to do anything right now because you're in that place now where you're financially independent. And in the funny sense is that a lot of us want to get to that place, but then for someone who's in that place, you're realizing, wow, the hard part sometimes is to be motivated because you know that you don't have to.
Not that I don't look at these sites anymore, because I do, but just not to the same, not to the same quantity degree as before. But like, if you look on the bogleheads.org forum or the Mr. Money Mustache forums or things like that, you'll occasionally, not even so occasionally, you'll see people who are dying at work and they just want to hit whatever their number is or whatever it means to them for where they call it freedom. And then you see these same types of people, maybe not the exact same people, but the same exact types of people who've just done that and they're not happy, or that, so it's really a more complicated problem than just hitting whatever number you think it can sustain the type of lifestyle you want. I mean, money is definitely a tool to do all kinds of things. But yeah, I'm working on that. I mean, for example, the solar project you asked about, kind of community earlier, it's like tangible. Like what if instead of, mutual funds, which I think are helping out somehow, right? You are giving money to a lot of businesses, which do help a lot of people, but tangible, can I put up, how much solar could I put up? Like how much, and I'm looking at, basically being able to power a community, a small community on solar exclusively. Like if I could take one town and turn it to 100% solar, net consumption. I mean, that's really wild. That'd be big.
Can we actually dive into that just a little bit? Can you tangibly tell us what is the difference really when you use solar versus, just the regular power, and what that effect is like when you're saying, wow, can I really transform this community and have it completely powered solar? Like, what does that look like for our environment and just, for their lives?
Yeah. I don't think anybody's life, you'd be able to kind of tell the difference, which is kind of the beauty of it. Like, I like the idea that it happens kind of in the background, but that it does have a global effect. So CO2 is causing 75% of the kind of harmful global warming that we're experiencing now. And that's going to be really one of the most kind of consequential things that we go through this century, for sure. And we're currently kind of exceeding all of our targets. We're really outpacing things. Things are bad. We don't want to not take any action and kind of head to where the end of the century kind of projections are. They're really scary. They're really bad. So if you look at the total life cycle analysis of different fuel sources for electricity generation, things like solar and wind and all that are near zero. I mean, you do need to mine the components. You do need to actually manufacture them. You need to transport them. You need to maintain them. And I mean, some of this is really small. Like in the case of solar, you need to clean them off like once a month, because they get dusty. It's not that big of a deal. But if you look at some of the fossil fuel type ones, now coal is on the way out, but coal was by far the worst fuel source. But natural gas is kind of halfway in between coal and solar and wind and stuff like that. The more that we can transition to these kind of renewable energies, these low carbon fuels like solar and wind and geothermal and nuclear, that's going to be a big deal. Yeah. So this is just kind of accelerating that transition because solar and other renewables now are coming online at a price that's actually competitive, right? Just purely competitive on price. So let's hustle. Let's do it. I'm a climate scientist, so I'm like eager on this. I took all the solar classes at Stanford when I was there, but like. I really think if I'm getting excited about it, it's this kind of, we're right in the kind of inflection of that wave. And for me, I don't even care necessarily if it's like the absolute best thing I could do with my money in terms of, return. But if I can get the return that I'm looking for and make a tangible impact, that would make me feel good. And if it could also, not only in terms of the return, but smooth it out a little bit more so that as a pseudo retiree, I could rely on it a little bit more because, as we've just seen with the stock market, in the last month, you really don't know what you're signing up for.
Right.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, working towards this, a wildly wealthy life of their own, do you have maybe 3 tips, actionable tips that our listeners could like start to put in practice to help them start achieving their own goals in that area?
Yeah. Track your spending. You don't even have to do anything. Just track it. Just, can you tell me where your money's going? And on a course level, I don't need to know if it's like sit down restaurant versus fast food versus, no. Just whatever categories work for you. I use mint.com and I have my own spreadsheet. And so I just plop into my spreadsheet, like the mortgage goes on there, the credit card payoff goes on there, so everything, I have a spreadsheet for cash flow. It's just like the most coarse categories for everything that comes in and then where it all goes out.
Yeah.
And then I kind of calculate what the net of the month was. Did we, how much did we bring in versus how much did we spend?
Yeah.
So track your spending, I think for sure. So many people don't know what they're doing at all. So if you don't know, then you can't make any decision. I'm not even telling you to make the decision yet. Right. Number 2, throw as much as you can into retirement accounts, and throw it into retirement accounts into the cheapest mutual funds you can find, because you're gonna have a really long time horizon, so that that expense ratio is the only number that you should really look at. That's the amount that it costs. So an expense ratio is how much they charge you per year. So they'll take out from the total balance that you have, that amount. So if the expense ratio is 1%, that means they're taking 1% of your total amount of money every year.
Yeah.
It's an enormous number. So my expense ratios on my funds are 0.04, 0.05. I think the most expensive thing that I have is 0.11. I would not recommend going over 0.5. Like you just don't need it.
Yeah.
There's no real, for what the typical person is trying to do, there's actually no real reason to go over that kind of rough amount. Unless your company is terrible and they don't offer anything that's cheap, then just do whatever the cheap one is. It's probably fine.
Yeah.
Those are the big ones. Maybe I skipped over debt because I've had such a strong aversion to debt, but don't don't go into credit card debt. Don't go into credit card debt. There are other things maybe. I mean, I have a mortgage right now, but like, yeah, if you're having trouble with that, track your spending and get out of debt, and don't do the retirement account thing until you're out of debt and you know what you're spending.
I like that a lot. That's good.
Yeah,
That's easy. It's something that everybody
can
kind
do.
of in the back of their head, they know they're supposed to do,
right.
And then it's just hearing that will hopefully, like, a few people will pick up on that.
Yeah. Awesome.
If you're out of debt and throwing money into retirement accounts just on autopilot, that's the ultimate.
Right.
Especially if you can get it automatically deducted out of your paycheck or automatically transferred each month or whatever like that. There's no real point doing anything else. You don't need to track your investments. You don't need to log in and look at the balance. It probably just do more harm than good in terms of make you want to tinker or make you freak you out. Yeah, just stay away from it. Fidelity did this awesome study. They wanted to track who their best clients were, who performed best. There's two groups of people. The first group were people that forgot they had an account there, right? And the second group were dead people. So don't do anything. You don't know. Just stay away. Just let it ride.
Wow, that's hilarious. That's very telling. That's hilarious. That's awesome. Well, we have loved chatting with you. I love your perspective. It's just your perspective on money and how that ties into just like how you do your life, your profession, your hobbies. It's just so awesome. We are now on our quick 10 rapid fire questions. These are questions we ask all our guests. Some of them are related to our podcast theme, and some of them are just random things we want to know about our guests. We ask you to say the first thing that comes to your mind. Don't censor yourself, and we'll keep it quick and concise. Are you ready?
All right.
All right. Number one, if you could choose one book to live by, what would it be?
Oh, this is terrible. I'm so bad at this. Oh my gosh.
Right. It's only number one too. We've got.
Oh man, I'm really going to fail this. I was totally prepared for like an investing book. I was going to say like the Boglehead's Guide to Investing, but that's not what you should live your life by.
Oh, it's okay.
That's the first thing I was supposed to spit out of my mouth, right? So, yeah, that's not my real answer, but there you go. There's a good investing book.
Okay.
Your personal hero, living or deceased, someone you know or maybe don't know.
There's this climber named Wojtek Krtika who has these most profound quotes and things.
Yeah.
Just this really introspective guy who had a really unique way of looking at big problems and at looking at life. So maybe him.
Awesome.
Awesome. Number 3, one thing you intentionally have to do every single day.
I try to exercise most every day. Maybe 6 days a week. It depends.
Nice.
Awesome. One hobby that brings you the most joy.
Walking. Yeah.
So simple. I love it.
Yep.
Most rewarding thing you've done for someone in need.
Ooh. I like on some of these climbing trips when you see really profoundly poor people like in Pakistan this summer. These guys are getting paid maybe $12 a day to carry 60 pounds, and they're in sandals and all that. And I would just save food and not eat like half of my lunch, and I would just give food out to guys on the trail.
That's amazing.
Nobody ever turned down a potato or a nut.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is a big shift. First movie quote that comes to mind.
God damn it, Donnie. Big Lebowski.
Nice. Awesome. Last big purchase you made for yourself.
I bought some mountain boots. They're super light. They're kind of a hybrid between a backpacking boot and a technical climbing boot, so they can take a cramp on. So
okay.
I was planning on getting up in the Sierra with them, but now we're locked down. So
Yeah. That's cool.
Later. Yep.
Food you cannot live without.
Ooh. I love these sesame sticks. These like fried sesame sticks. Delicious.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That is very specific.
I just stock up and I take them everywhere. Yeah. I always hike with them. Yeah. They're great.
Sesame sticks. Okay. What is your spirit animal?
Okay. It's either a beaver, a marmot, or a pika. I would say probably a marmot. Rodents or lagomorphs. For sure I'd say marmot right now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. And then number 10, this last one, finish the sentence. If I'm stuck on an island by myself,
I'd walk all around it. walk the whole way around. God, I have the most boring answers.
Well, you love walking.
I do.
Yeah, it fits in perfectly. That's awesome.
Or I'd go for a swim. Yeah.
Yeah.
Swim the entire perimeter.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we have loved chatting with you. This has just been so awesome. Where can our listeners find out more about you? And if you were to encourage our listeners to serve into or to give into something in their community, what would it be?
So you can find me at hmix.org. And there's a link to contact me if you'd like on there. And I think in terms of serving, it doesn't have to be the traditional view of community service. So really thinking about what am I good at and what brings me joy, I think usually is the start to how you can help other people with it.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Very simple and awesome. Well, thank you. This has been so great.
All right. Thank you all.
Love just chatting with you. So thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much and good luck with your project.
Well, Hari Mix, what an amazing just journey to financial independence and just his whole career path, how different he is from some of our other guests. You know, I mean, just earth scientists in general is probably one of the probably one of the most unique guests that we could ever have in our show. So I just love his perspective on knowing how to save on certain things so that you can live luxuriously on the things that you put value on. And I also love just his perspective on really helping the community through installing solar panels and solar energy. I just love how he has this balance of, hey, if I can invest my money into something that's actually really going to make a difference, that's where I want to put my passion into. So I just really love that about him.
And I really liked that through his difficulties with his mother and his grandfather passing, he really learned about estate planning, future planning, and a lot of great tips for our listeners on how to do that, how to go about that whole discussion. And I really just liked how he put together just good plans and a lot of great advice so that others are able to do future planning as well.
That's awesome. Well, I hope that you guys were inspired by our guest today. Next week, we are going to have Doug Nordman. Doug Nordman is a Navy guy. Love this dude. He is just amazingly financially free right now. He's actually a new grandfather. So cool. And him and his daughter have this awesome journey to financial independence. He really is very, very intentional in teaching his daughter how to be financially free. And they actually team up together and they are writing a book called How to Raise Military Kids to Be Financially Savvy. And just excited to have him on. We hope that you catch him next week.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wildly Wealthy Life. We hope that this episode has helped you take another step towards living fully, giving freely, and building a legacy that deeply impacts your community. We'd love to hear what you think about today's show. Please leave us a review or like us on iTunes and YouTube, and click the subscribe button so you won't miss a show. You can also visit us at wildlywealthylife.com for today's show notes. See you on our next episode. Thank you, and may you live a wildly wealthy life.